Burnout is a real thing, you guys. How many of you have experienced burnout? How many of you have heard of others experiencing burnout? And maybe you're having some warning signs, but you're not quite sure if you're in burnout yet. This is the episode for you. There's so much literature and information out there, and Reagan and Liana consolidate that and bring it together in a very concise chat for you to really understand what burnout is and how it's impacting people today. Also, what you can do to take some steps towards feeling better right away. I hope you have a listen and that you're on that road to recovery soon if this is you.
Sage is a 501c3 nonprofit organization building community by providing education and counseling about physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. We encourage all of our listeners to find their own path to what holistic wellness means to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Liana Huseman with Sage Holistic Wellness Center. I am a licensed MFT, and we also have, go ahead, Reagan.
And I am Reagan Hovey. I am also a therapist at Sage. I am an associate marriage and family therapist and associate professional clinical counselor. Happy to be here today.
Soon to be licensed.
I know, right? Soon enough.
Getting closer. All right. Well, we want to thank everyone for joining us who are able to join us or just popping on in. We are just going to do a little chat today, and it's going to be on burnout. This is, I think, a term that is used quite frequently, and I'm wondering if people, reason why we're doing the chat is if people really know the difference between what actual like clinical burnout feels like versus stress. And so I think we'll just kind of start it with maybe defining or just listing the differences between the two. Is that cool with you, Reagan?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think we decided to talk about this because Reagan and I both realized that we both experienced burnout and at one point in our lives, and we did not identify it as burnout. We just continue to say, oh, we're stressed out. But come to realize that our symptoms started to increase and become more severe, that we realized, oh, wow, we've entered burnout and it doesn't feel good. And we're wondering how many other people maybe think that they're stressed out and haven't realized that it has escalated into burnout. So we just want to do a little bit of enlightenment, maybe talk about some personal experiences. So for me, I guess I will start off with just stress, right? Like stress in a nutshell is usually because we take too much on, right? It's like the abundance of, we're pushed past our comfort levels and we just have like too much on our plates. And this can show up mentally, physically, emotionally. And I think to just like sum it up, it's like over engagement. Like we've stretched ourselves too thin. We have too much going on. We're at a rapid pace. We're constantly in the future, right? We're not present. And this can come out in different symptoms as well. And the symptoms can be actually similar to burnout. And so burnout for me would be like the opposite, right? It's like you're overextended. It's like excessive stress. And so when your stress reaches a certain threshold, you kind of move into burnout. And so it can feel very similar. And they kind of are in the same category, right? Like the same spectrum.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it can be easily disguised as stress, but this is more of like this extreme stress leaves you ultimately drained and disengaged, where you're like left with not a lot in your tank, right? Where stress, you're overly doing it. And then burnout, it's like you're depleting, where there's nothing left in your tank, which can lead to clinical depression, right? Or anxiety. That's kind of how I look at it. Reagan, please add to what I mentioned or anything else that you have in your experience.
I mean, gosh, I feel like you've done such a lovely job of describing that, and just even that sort of like separation between that sense of like over engagement versus it like shifting into disengagement, which even brings up, that there is an optimal level of stress that we experience, right? It's like enough of like, oh, I got to go do this thing, or but there is certainly a threshold at which it sort of crosses and it becomes like you're outside of your window of tolerance. And it's a very, I experience it in a very like kind of like similar way in the sense of like with stress, I feel like a real like visceral physical sensation to it. Like I can feel it at the end of the day with like a tension in my shoulders and just like a heaviness. But like throughout the day, I feel it kind of this like frenetic pace of like, okay, we're going from one thing to the next. With burnout, this is when it crossed that threshold for me. Burnout was more of like just almost a sense of like dissociation. Like I felt almost nothing. Like there was not that sort of pace of I'm running from one thing to the next. It was just like I was moving through almost what is it? It's not quicksand, but it's like moving through sand.
Yeah,
That slow
like that muddiness.
pace.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it felt like a level of exhaustion, no matter what the task was, no matter if it was something that on its, it could just be, oh, I gotta go, I gotta mail this letter. And that felt like just this huge, huge task. Like, I don't know if I can do that. And just yeah,
tasks, right? Yeah, the simplest tasks feel like they're the biggest tasks, and you don't know why, right? Because you go from this like high functioning person or just normal functioning. I mean, you're able to get things done, let's just say, to the point where you just mentioned, I have to mail something, right? And then it's like, well, wait a minute, I have to like put the letter or info in an envelope, and I got to write, where it's got to go. I have to find a stamp. I don't even know where to get that. Or I have to go to the post office, or even walking out to your front yard. Like every little thing about that task seems so huge, so big. And because you have nothing left, that's when you start to disengage. Like, that's too much. I can't do that. And I think that's probably one of the biggest signs, right? It's one of the biggest indicators of burnout, where you've passed that threshold and now you're into this like whole new world. And when you say disassociate, what do you mean by that for viewers who maybe aren't really familiar with that word?
I'm so glad that you asked. And in a lot of ways, it's sort of it is almost like an out-of-body experience, but it's almost not in a way that I'm even like out of my body. It's just I am not here, but I am also not outside of it. I am not present in the things that I am doing, and really just not even that sense of at the end of the day where I feel like that tension in my shoulders. I mean, in some instances, it's kind of sometimes people can experience it as, like long stretches of time. And it's like, well, what were you doing? What were you thinking about?
Mm-hmm.
And you're seeking to recall. And it's like, I don't really know.
Like
I don't know. Like, yeah.
Like you're spacing out. And for me, I experienced this a few years back, where I would get to work, and a lot of this happened at work for me, where I don't know why I was more at work than at home. Maybe it's a comfort thing, or maybe because at work you really need to be able to complete tasks, right? So you have like a list, where at home maybe you just got to relax a little bit. But at work, these symptoms heightened for me. And I remember getting to my desk as a therapist, right? And I had clients and I had notes and I had things to do. And it would take me an hour to get like one note, which should take no more than 10 to 15 minutes to get done. Memory loss. I couldn't remember the simplest tasks. I couldn't remember like names. I couldn't remember how to do simple things. And then just being able to move from one side of the office to the next, it took an hour. And so that's what I think when you say disassociate, that's what I connected with, right? Where it's like you're there, but you're not. You're just like on autopilot and you're getting things done, but you're not working at your full capacity. And
whatsoever.
And then here's the thing, right? I'm feeling this way. And what do? I'm like, I'm stressed out, and I got a lot going on. And No part of me said, alert, alert, this is not okay, right? No part of
Yeah.
me said red flags left and right. You should probably really look into this. I gave myself that, I just regarded what I was feeling and said, well, stress. And I think that's something that that word, or even using that word in a sentence or for yourself, it's so normalized, right? Everyone's stressed
Oh,
out.
yeah.
So
Well, it's this
don't you join the club?
hustle
Show
culture.
up.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a badge, I feel like at this point in time, right? Where it's almost like, I mean, these conversations that I even have had, especially like, I mean, I can think about during grad school, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, I'm taking this class and this class and this class. And then I'm also doing, I'm working and I have practicum and I have all these things. And people are like, wow, it's almost like,
I said, wow.
that's incredible. You're working so hard, you're doing all these things. And then I certainly feel like I almost took that on as like, oh, yeah, this is good. This is good. I should just keep adding things to my plate because, people are recognizing that I'm a hustler. I'm getting things done. And then it was like you were describing, right? It was a situation that initially I kind of was able to optimize my ability to plug into sort of that like stress response, right? Of like using that cortisol, using that to like get things done. However, that's not a sustainable way to live by any means, right? To constantly be flooded with cortisol, that doesn't work.
It doesn't, but you
And
just
then
brought up
yeah.
such an amazing point that it's like a badge of honor, right? It's saying, look what I can do. I can do this. I can hustle. I mean, even the word hashtag hustle is so, I
Truly,
got this,
truly.
I'm a hustler and I'm this and that. And
Mhm.
I do think there's a time and place for those titles, and I get that, right? And even recognizing, I think, the entrepreneurial spirit. A lot of entrepreneurs go through a different type of stress, and they experience burnout faster than most, right? And then even up for us therapists to go out on our own, who are used to having all the support, and then now we're on our own, maybe private practice or whatnot, and we're switching roles and switching environments. And so we say, oh, we're good because we're hustling and we're making money and we got to do what we got to do. And we don't need to sleep. We don't need to eat regularly. Like we got this. And in actuality, our body is talking to us, right? That the whole idea, the body keeps score. And I
Mhm.
think that's something for our viewers to recognize, that you might be wondering, well, like, how do I know if I'm stressed or if I'm experiencing burnout? One of the best ways to recognize this is to first stop, take a breath, and be present with your body and see what your body is saying to you. It speaks to you first. Your body is the first indicator. It tells you exactly what you're feeling. And most times we decide to ignore it. We decide to say, no, we're all good. We're good. I'm just stressed out. I have a lot going on, which most people do, right? Most of us have a lot going on. And kudos to those who can multitask and have a lot going on. I think that's amazing, but it doesn't mean it's the most healthiest place to be in all the time. I think you just touched on that. It's not an optimal level for us to function in a healthy capacity. And so when I say keep score, some of the examples are for burnout is sleep issues.
Yeah.
Either not getting enough sleep or oversleeping, or just whatever it is that you have going on, this whatever sleep you have or you're able to conquer in one night, it never seems like enough. So that's one way your body talks to you, is saying, hey, you got 8 hours of sleep and we are still so tired. We are so lethargic. We are telling you something's up, something's wrong, right? Illness, right? Your immune system goes down and you have a weakened immune system. So you tend to actually be more sick more times than the average person who is maybe getting more rest, right? So that's your body saying, hey, you're breaking us down, and we're going to show you what it feels like when you break us down and don't give us love and rest and good nutrition. we're going to make you
Mhm.
sick. But we might just say, oh, I just caught the cold, a few more times this year. I must wash my hands more, right? So we give each other a little bit more, or give ourselves some excuses. Reagan, do you
Mhm.
have any to add to that?
I mean, even just like kind of like an increased sense of like irritability, right? That's, I mean, there's a certain level of irritability that I think is in some ways kind of like inescapable. However, like if you notice yourself just like irritable around everything, and kind of like that cynicism that can come up in tandem with burnout, right? Where it's sort of like, what's the point? Right,
Yeah.
that like lack of motivation in anything.
Yes.
And even if you find yourself like really like readily almost like engaging in like escape fantasies, right? Like
Mm,
persistently, right? Like whenever you have a spare minute and you find yourself just thinking about being somewhere, anywhere else,
yeah.
when that becomes this persistent, prevalent thing, or even just like engaging in more like isolation, because that occurs as well. Um, um, in terms of if I'm burnt out and I feel disinclined and I feel that sense of disengagement and disconnection, then for me, that's certainly shown up in just like isolation. Um,
Yeah.
and just really a lot of it, just seconding a lot of you're saying that sort of like frequent illness and the exhaustion, and no amount of sleep ever feels like it's quite enough. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Oh, you touched on so many key points. And I think the isolation is one of the symptoms that I think once you get there,
Yeah.
there's an issue. Because isolation, I mean, and I don't mean that even to question introverts. I'm so introverted and I need my alone time to re-energize, but the isolation piece is really important to talk about because that also can keep you from seeking help, right? So when you
Yeah.
get to that place and you're like, I'm at a point now where I can't be around anyone. I don't want to be around anyone. For me, that's kind of entering a dangerous level of burnout because that can keep you from acknowledging what's actually happening to you. And it can keep you from reaching out to say, hey, to anyone, whether it's a friend, a colleague, a professional, say, I need some help here. Right. And so these are just such, classic signs of clinical burnout. One thing I want to add from personal experience, and I did mention this on our last chat, is for me, burnout was actually causing infertility for me. Burnout was changing my hormone levels. Um, it was, I had blood work done and I had a panel of like all of my results and for anyone out there who might be struggling with this, it could be, right? There's a chance that it could be how you're taking care of yourself or not taking care of yourself due to
Mhm.
extreme stress. So for me, I wasn't producing a hormone to ultimately get pregnant. And once I figured that out, I mean, life changing, right? I sought help from a functional doctor first, which led me to one of the tips I want to give to someone who maybe has now acknowledged that they are experiencing burnout. What do you do next? Do you change your life? Do you stop working? Do you know, what's the answer? And I think for me, it wasn't a simple answer. I got this information like you are extremely burned out. Your body is screaming at you. Your body is now failing you because you have ignored it for so long
Mhm.
and gut issues. I thought I'm allergic. I thought I had a gluten intolerance. I thought that I could not, eat certain foods. I thought I had a dairy. I thought I was lactose intolerant. And what happened was like, even my gut was yelling at me and saying, hey, no matter what you put in your body at this point, we are going to react to it. We're going to react and you really need to do something. So after being stressed out, I didn't have a lot of these issues. It's just you're stressed. When burnout happened,
Mhm.
my body started to fail me. I think that's the biggest piece here. So for me, one thing that I allowed myself to finally do was to listen to what was happening to me, right? Sitting in the present moment and just marking off like with the check mark, like what is my body saying? Okay, I'm not sleeping well. Okay. I have gut issues. I have memory loss. I'm the biggest pessimist I've ever been. I'm kind of known for being pessimistic, but it's even more so now. I found no enjoyment in life.
Mm.
My motivation, um, I dreaded going to work because that's where I needed to be the most functional. And when I was at work, I felt an overwhelming feeling of sadness, of irritability. So I just started to create a checklist of everything that I was feeling that normally I do not. So it was just like a contrast, like a simple pen and paper. And I meant pen and paper because it's like my body's writing, putting that energy
Mhm,
towards
mhm.
it. And then finally saying, oh, I give my permission to stop. I had to give my permission to stop what I was doing, to stop thinking what I was thinking, and to make a choice. Now, for me, and I'm not promoting this, but I quit my job. I said, I can't do this anymore. Specifically, where I was at was not healthy for me. And instead of what it seems pretty simplistic, right? I quit my job and then applied somewhere else and got a different job, right? A different environment. I was able to change my environment. And so that's a pretty drastic change. And I'm saying I don't think everyone can do that, but I didn't even know I had the choice to give myself that. Does that make sense? Like, I didn't know
Yeah,
that I could do that. I thought I just had to keep on keeping on. Like, you can't, if you quit, you're failing, or, all of these,
yeah,
distorted
yeah.
ideas of myself. And so I just gave myself permission to make a decision that was more healthy for me. And Megan, I'm curious to know what experiences you have had when you've realized I'm in burnout and I need to do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's as you've noted, it's a difficult experience. And I mean, personally for me, it was almost like I felt like everywhere that I was turning, like what everyone was telling me is, you just got to take better care of yourself. And even the idea of self-care almost felt like, again, I was like, just another task almost. I was like, well, like to what end? Like,
Mhm.
I mean, like I got a massage and then I was just like, I'm just a more massaged version of myself. Like I still feel, um, and in some ways it was kind of that, at least for me, it was sort of like coming to the understanding that I'm not going to change it all in one day.
Mhm.
Um, and that in some ways for myself, I needed to insert just more small things and more small, consistent things throughout my day. And even just kind of taking stock of like, what are the activities that I'm engaging in right now that are draining all of my energy? And what are the activities that I'm doing that are kind of refilling my cup? And what I realized was that the proportions were really quite off. Um,
Yeah.
but in a lot of ways, I mean, talking about it was a big one too. Just like reaching out to other people because I was in that space of like feeling really like disconnected and sort of like alone in it of like, oh my gosh, like something is wrong. Like I am struggling to care about anything right now. And so just verbalizing it to other people like, man, I'm going through something and kind of having that validated and normalized for me. Certainly it provided some level of, okay, I'm not alone in this,
Sure.
which inherently reconnected me to other people. Because I had already felt so disconnected. So that was like some small piece, but a lot of it was sort of just addressing like you've so beautifully touched on like all these like different ways that like it impacts our body, and just implementing more even just like embodied check-ins. So instead of even this like very small shift of asking those questions of why, I was asking a lot of why questions. Why do I feel this way? What's like why why does everything feel so tough right now? Why did this happen to me? And just shifting it into how, right?
Huge.
Instead of asking myself like, why is this happening? Or why do I feel this way? And I was asking myself like, how am I experiencing this? which inherently requires of me to sort of even check in, to become less dissociated and to be like, how am I experiencing this? How does my body feel? Does it feel super tense? Does it feel really clenched? And typically it felt very clenched, just like, ah. Which going to the body, though, it immediately, at least in some instances, gave me something to then address of like, okay, let me take care of that. Like if I feel clenched, let me just unclench my jaw. Ooh,
it's taking yourself out of that like autopilot mode, right? It's taking yourself out of this is just life and this is what it is. And sometimes, that is survival, right? Sometimes we have to say this is life right now and it's not forever and I'll get through it. But in other moments, and more related to this topic, is that we can actually check in with ourselves and say, is this life? Is this really what this is about? Because if my body isn't functioning at an optimal level, what type of care am I giving to others? And then we can just move into our field, right? For our fellow therapist, you mentioned, not caring. How can a therapist not care while providing therapy? That is
ruined.
exactly. And for me, when I said I quit my job, that was the big thing for me, where I went, how can I be an amazing therapist, hold space for clients who need me when I can't even hold space for myself? So it was not, for me, it was like I had to quit. I had to leave. I had to make sure that I was keeping the integrity of all of myself and all the other therapists out there, right? It was a great reminder that if you're going to choose a field, a profession where you're giving a lot of yourself to others, and we're talking mental health, healthcare, and just so many different professions that require a lot of us. We are in the healer space, right? We're there to help people in their moment of healing the self. And we have to make sure that we are providing safety, right? And that is huge for me, is making sure that I am providing a safe place for not just myself, but for my client to work through whatever they're entrusting me that I can harness that. And in that moment, I went, I'm a fraud. Oh my gosh. Like it shook me to my core. So for me, I had to give myself that permission to step away from my profession and I experienced burnout so extreme that I had to leave, right? I hope that doesn't happen to many people. I hope that you can, maybe even just by talking about it, realize you're getting there, and that maybe taking a few extra steps to, like what Reagan said, engaging in things that don't deplete you, but that energize you. Just being a little bit more aware of actions you're taking that are not benefiting you. Getting back to nature, getting back to taking a walk outside, natural vitamin D, use the sun. We're in spring now. Like taking little steps to just say, okay, I need to start taking care of my body. And here are the ways that I can. That's another important one too. It's not have the highest expectations of what you can do. It's to say, what can I do right now? Or Reagan, how can I implement this one thing to help me shift from being way up here and just kind of bringing that down and leveling out the tools that I have here, right? Not looking for new things, but looking for pre-existing tools that you have, that work, that you just have to pay a little bit more attention to. And to get back, and I'm so happy and grateful that I took that time, because it brought me back into the therapeutic world and into a space that was more well fitted for me, right? So I was in a space that wasn't fitted for me at all, but I was able to say, I need to allow myself that permission, excuse me, and find where I needed to be. And currently I'm in that space, and it makes all of the difference in my life, in my client's life. And again, to uphold what I find as the main value in what I do, is that's safety, right? Safety for me and my clients.
Yeah. And just that permission piece is so huge here, right? Because
we're horrible at it.
We are. And at the same time, it's like that permission piece is kind of honoring your own limits, right? So often, like I found myself just in that, like, as I reflect, it's like that comparison trap of like, well, I see all these other people around me like doing all these things and they seem fine, and they're really like they're going and they're going and they're going, so I should be able to do the same, and kind of giving myself permission to say, well, that's them, and maybe they have different limits.
Yeah.
These are my limits, and I need to honor them.
Oh, that's tough too, right? Because you might think, well, I'm less than, or if they can do it, I can do it. But to have that awareness to know, like, hey, good for them. I'm glad that they can do what they can do. Maybe that's not my cup of tea. Maybe that's not for me. And getting in tune with yourself. I don't know. Hi, maybe go back to therapy, maybe work this out, head up a friend, someone you feel safe with that can hold space for you to say, hey, what's actually happening here? Am I really living the life that I want to live and that I'm capable of, or am I somewhere else right now? So just reaching out, talking to somebody, and to really, really hone in on what your body is saying to you. We have a nutritionist on board, Crystal, and she actually kind of sparked some of this, some of these sage chats, because we are learning so much more about what we put into our body and how that affects us, which then went to, wait, our body, what? Our body needs our body is our tool. It's a master, it's like a blueprint, right? It's letting us know that you can turn inward and rely on yourself, and to just listen and say, this is the first step. And I know some people might be like, well, I have to go get blood work done, I have to go do this. No, not yet. You can just sit with yourself and, just look at some of the symptoms that we listed, or just, a simple Google search as to what burnout is, and make that checklist for yourself and see if you fit into some of, the classic signs of burnout, and to just make a choice, right? Just make a choice of even just being aware of what's happening can make the world of a difference, from being stressed to extreme stress to burnout, to the point where you might have to do what I did, which is go extreme and quit my job. But we're hoping that this chat can just bring some enlightenment to what could happen if we are not being aware of what's actually happening internally, and not putting more effort into what serves us,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think, Reagan, to sum it up?
I mean, I feel like you've really hit on like what I feel like is an important component here in understanding that there's different pieces to this puzzle, as it were, right? There is certainly an emotional component that can be addressed, and then also like just the recognition that there is a really huge, like, the relationship between the foods that we're eating and the hormones that we have. It's just, there's a lot of different pieces to it, and just checking in with yourself around those things, in big or small ways, and in that recognition of the limits, like even just a small check-in every day, even if it's just like, how am I feeling today? Because that's how you figure out where your limits are, rather than it being something where, okay, that line has been crossed. That line is 6 miles back. Okay, I gotta walk the 6 miles back. Rather than it being, you know what, today I feel like I'm a few steps over that line of my limit. How do I walk myself back? And just implementing these small things. And sometimes it's going to be through discussion or through therapy, and sometimes it can be also through just a number of things.
Yes, I think that's so beautifully put. And I'm so glad we were able to throw this chat together and bring up some just some key points to what burnout is, what it could possibly be, and to hopefully inspire you all to just do some daily check-ins and allow your body to speak to you, and know some of your limits. And your limits change, right? Depending on the season of your life, you could have different limits. It doesn't mean you're limited, just means that sometimes life is pretty hectic, and we can't conquer it all at one time. So we hope that you got some great tips from today, and we hope to continue to talk about some of these really cool topics. And thank you, Reagan, so much for joining me.
Thank you for spending some of your time today with us at Sage Holistic Health and Wellness Center. If you like what we're all about, please consider supporting our nonprofit organization by making a tax-deductible donation. To do this, you can go to our website at www.sagewellnessctr.org and click on Donate in the upper right-hand corner. We look forward to spending some time again with you real soon. Take good care.